The morning sunlight filtered through the dense canopy of Otsego County's woods, casting dappled shadows on the ground below. It was a day like any other in this secluded part of Michigan, where silence reigned supreme. But for the local law enforcement, this tranquility was about to be shattered. Responding to reports of squatting, the officers made their way to a remote cabin hidden deep within the forest. The cabin stood weathered and forlorn amidst the trees, its presence almost ghostly. As they approached, Officers Daniels and Martinez exchanged uneasy glances. The door creaked open under the weight of their approach, revealing a scene that would haunt them. Inside, the dim light revealed Margaret Carlyle's frail body lying motionless on a tattered sofa, her skin marred with bruises and cuts that told their own harrowing story. Edward Carlyle, her husband, stood by with a hardened expression. His eyes were a mix of defiance and fear as he met the officer's questioning gaze. "I didn't do anything," he insisted vehemently when questioned about his wife's condition. Yet his words were belied by his volatile demeanor. Every twitch and abrupt movement hinted at a man barely keeping his composure. The officer's eyes swept across the room, noting signs of struggle, overturned furniture, scattered belongings, and restraint marks on Margaret's wrists. These indications contradicted Edward's denial and painted a picture of prolonged abuse. Sensing more than what met the eye, Officer Daniels decided to secure the cabin for further forensic analysis. The evidence suggested deeper layers to this tragic tableau, which required careful unraveling. Leaving the cabin behind, the officers turned towards the local neighborhood bordering the forest. Here, they hoped to gather more about the couple's life from those who had witnessed it from afar. However, their presence was met with silence and suspicious gazes. The neighbors seemed reluctant to speak, fearful perhaps of repercussions or simply wary of delving into someone else's sorrow-fraught existence. Eventually, an elderly woman named Mrs. Thompson broke the impasse. Her voice was barely above a whisper as she recounted seeing Edward frequently in heated arguments with Margaret. The couple's disagreements were common knowledge, yet seldom discussed openly, a silent acknowledgement of domestic strife simmering under their roof. This revelation prompted investigators to delve deeper into Edward and Margaret's background. What had driven their isolation? And what role did Edward play in Margaret's visible suffering? Back at the forensic lab, technicians pored over evidence collected from the cabin. Initial tests yielded little beyond confirming what was already suspected. A struggle had indeed occurred. Yet as they dug deeper, a more sinister narrative began to unfold. Traces of sedatives were found in Margaret's system, an unsettling discovery that aligned with signs of restraint observed earlier. These drugs suggested she might have been incapacitated intentionally. Armed with this new information, Detective Harper decided to pursue Edward's medical records in search of more clues that could illuminate his actions. The investigation had only just begun, but already it promised more questions than answers. Each revelation seemed to cast new shadows on an already murky case. As twilight descended over Otsego County once more, an unsettling stillness enveloped the woods again, a reminder of secrets yet uncovered and truths waiting to emerge. And just as they thought they had pieced together part of the puzzle, a call came in. Edward Carlyle had vanished from sight without a trace. The hunt was on, again. As twilight fell over Otsego County and the unsettling quiet reclaimed the woods, Detective Harper stood outside the police station, pondering Edward Carlyle's mysterious disappearance. The investigation, shadowed by uncertainty, demanded a deeper dive into Margaret's past. Early the next morning, Harper directed his focus to the local hospital records department. The goal was clear: to uncover any signs of past abuse or drug use in Margaret's medical history. The stark walls of the records room held stories of countless lives. But for Harper, it was Margaret's narrative he sought to unravel. The records were sparse and fragmented, a reflection of the couple's transient lifestyle. Yet, within these incomplete documents lay patterns that raised alarms. Multiple ER visits marked by injuries labeled as accidental painted a troubling picture. Each entry deepened the suspicion of chronic abuse, an unspoken history concealed beneath layers of denial and evasion. Aware that these findings could reshape their understanding of the couple's dynamic, Harper decided to revisit the forensic evidence with these new insights. His mind raced with possibilities as he wondered what else could be lurking beneath the surface. Transitioning from paper trails to personal accounts, Harper next visited a local diner, a community hub where Edward and Margaret were known patrons. Here, he hoped to find voices willing to share truths hidden in plain sight. The diner buzzed with morning chatter as Harper approached potential witnesses. Yet their stories were as varied as they were conflicting. Some described Edward as kind but troubled. Others recalled tense interactions between him and Margaret. Just as confusion threatened to stall progress, a breakthrough emerged. A server named Lisa hesitantly recounted seeing Edward purchase sedatives on more than one occasion, a revelation aligning with forensic findings from Margaret's system. This discovery intensified suspicions about Edward's possible attempts to control or incapacitate his wife. With this new lead in hand, Harper returned to the station. The pieces were coming together, but required an understanding of Edward's psyche to complete the picture. In the briefing room, a psychological analysis began to take shape, a profile that aimed to decode Edward's motives. Edward's erratic behavior posed challenges in crafting a cohesive profile, yet certain traits emerged consistently: a deep-seated fear of abandonment and an overwhelming need for control. These insights dovetailed with the pattern of abuse uncovered earlier, suggesting a man driven by desperation rather than malice alone. This psychological perspective offered an unsettling clarity. It explained not just his actions towards Margaret, but also his audacious attempt to impersonate an officer at the morgue. It was an act born out of compulsive need rather than rational thought, a bid for control even after death had claimed its toll. As Harper contemplated these revelations, a fresh urgency propelled him forward. If Edward's actions were dictated by fear and obsession, what lengths might he go to now that he was free? Then, just as they thought they had reached an impasse, news crackled over the radio. Edward Carlyle had been spotted near an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The officers exchanged grim looks. This was likely their last chance before he vanished again. Racing against time and uncertainty, they sped towards the location, hearts pounding in anticipation of what they might find. As they neared the warehouse, shadows loomed large against its decrepit walls, echoes of untold stories waiting inside. With adrenaline coursing through their veins, they prepared to breach its silence. And then, a gunshot rang out from within. The gunshot echoed ominously through the desolate corridors of the abandoned warehouse. Detective Harper and his team froze momentarily, hearts pounding against their chests, before springing into action. They approached with caution, weapons drawn, each step crunching on broken glass and debris. Inside, the darkness was oppressive, broken only by the probing beams of their flashlights. Amidst the chaos, Harper's mind raced back to the morgue, where Edward Carlyle's brazen impersonation attempt had first come to light. The morgue staff had been tight-lipped, their reluctance a testament to privacy protocols. Despite this, enough whispers had emerged to suggest Edward's actions were driven by something deeper than mere grief, an unsettling need to control Margaret even after death. Piecing together this behavior with his past actions painted a portrait of a man teetering on the edge of psychological instability. Harper knew that understanding this compulsion was crucial to unraveling the mystery surrounding Margaret's tragic end. Back at the police station, Edward sat in the interrogation room under harsh fluorescent lights. His demeanor was defiant as he denied any wrongdoing. "I was just trying to be with her," he insisted, his voice a mixture of anger and desperation. Detective Harper watched him closely, noting each twitch and nervous glance. "You pretended to be a state trooper," Harper pressed, attempting to penetrate Edward's web of lies. "That goes beyond just wanting to see your wife." Edward's facade cracked slightly as he mentioned Margaret's friends, people Harper hadn't heard about before. "She was always off with them," Edward muttered bitterly, his words revealing an undercurrent of jealousy and possessiveness that hinted at his controlling nature. This revelation shifted Harper's perspective on the couple's dynamics entirely. If Margaret had indeed sought solace in others' company, it could explain Edward's increasing need for dominance, a chilling thought that added layers to his motives. Determined to uncover more, the team reviewed surveillance footage from the morgue. The recordings were partially corrupted, a frustrating limitation that left gaps in their understanding. Nonetheless, what they saw confirmed their suspicions. Edward's interaction with morgue staff was tense and calculated, suggesting premeditated intent rather than spontaneous grief. With each discovery, the puzzle pieces fell into place but revealed a more disturbing image of Edward's psyche, a man whose life was defined by fear of losing control. Harper knew they needed further analysis of Edward's history to understand how far this obsession might drive him now that he was unchained by societal norms or moral constraints. As they prepared for this next phase of investigation, a call interrupted their focus, a sighting of Edward near another location. Just as they strategized their approach, another officer rushed in with new intelligence. A note had been found clutched in Margaret's hand, overlooked during initial examinations because it blended with her clothing. Its contents were cryptic, but damning enough to suggest she had been planning an escape from Edward's grasp. The implications were staggering. If Margaret had sought freedom, what had truly driven her back into his clutches? The answers seemed just out of reach. Determined not to lose momentum, Harper gave orders for immediate deployment. As officers moved out, the weight of this new evidence hung heavy in the air, its truth cloaked in shadows yet demanding illumination. As night descended once more over Otsego County, uncertainty lingered like a fog, thick and impenetrable. And as they headed towards their next destination, one question clawed at Harper's mind. What other secrets might be buried beneath this tragic tale? Then came another report. Edward had taken someone hostage inside an old barn nearby. The stakes had just escalated dramatically. The tension was palpable as the officers raced towards the old barn where Edward was purportedly holding someone hostage. Detective Harper's mind swirled with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. But just as they turned a corner on a quiet road in Oakland County, an unexpected sight halted their advance. A familiar vehicle swerved erratically ahead. Edward Carlyle was attempting to flee once again, the tires of his car kicking up gravel as he accelerated away from the officers. The chase was on, adrenaline spiking through Harper's veins as he orchestrated the pursuit over the radio. The quiet road became a theater of flashing lights and blaring sirens, echoing through the night air. With precision and teamwork, the police managed to maneuver Edward's car to a halt. Officers approached with caution, weapons ready, as Edward emerged with hands raised, yet eyes defiant. The arrest was swift but tense, charged with the knowledge of what they might find next. As they searched his vehicle, a chilling discovery emerged: a forged police identification card and a small leather-bound diary. The diary's presence was ominous, promising insights into Edward's tumultuous mind. Back at the police station, Harper and his team gathered in their office, the diary splayed open under the harsh glow of desk lamps. Each page was filled with jagged handwriting, entries cryptic and unsettling. Harper read aloud passages that spoke of control and punishment, words that painted Edward as a man obsessed with dominance over Margaret. "This is no accident," Harper murmured, tracing a finger over one particularly disturbing entry that hinted at deliberate harm masked as care. The diary's contents were damning but also complex, revealing layers of manipulation Edward had woven around his wife. With this new evidence solidifying their case, they prepared for Edward's impending trial. But first, they needed to understand how these revelations resonated within the community. The town hall meeting convened days later was a microcosm of divided sentiments. Some townsfolk expressed disbelief in Edward's guilt, echoing his facade of a troubled but loving husband. Others were vocally outraged by the abuse Margaret had endured. As testimonies unfolded, a former acquaintance stepped forward, a woman who recounted her experiences with Edward's manipulative tendencies years prior. Her words were like pieces of a puzzle, aligning perfectly with everything Harper had come to suspect about Edward. These accounts fortified their understanding of Edward's character. a man driven by fear and control to destructive lengths. Yet as they collected these stories, Harper couldn't shake the feeling that something crucial still eluded them. The weight of anticipation hung heavy as they consolidated testimonies and evidence for trial. But just as they felt prepared to present their case against Edward Carlisle conclusively, an unexpected phone call shattered their certainty. It was from the morgue, again. A forensic technician had come across additional evidence on Margaret's body that suggested someone else might have been involved in her final days. This revelation threatened to turn their case upside down. Questions multiplied like shadows in Harper's mind. Who could have been complicit? What did this mean for Edward's presumed guilt? The implications were staggering. As night fell once more over Otsego County, Harper knew they stood on the precipice of deeper truths yet uncovered. And with each unfolding detail, it became increasingly clear that this investigation was far from over. The chapter closed on an urgent note. The unknown accomplice's identity loomed large, promising new directions and dangers ahead. The courtroom buzzed with muted whispers as the pretrial hearing commenced. Detective Harper sat among the attendees, his mind replaying the recent discovery from the morgue, an unsettling twist that hinted at more than Edward's singular guilt. Yet today, the focus remained squarely on Edward Carlisle and the abuse narrative they had painstakingly built. The prosecution presented a compelling array of evidence and testimonies, each piece adding weight to the charges against Edward. Photos of Margaret's injuries, the sedatives found in her system, and Edward's own damning diary entries were methodically unveiled. Yet, it was Margaret's voice, captured in a series of recorded conversations, that resonated most powerfully. Her words painted a stark picture of entrapment and fear, solidifying the abuse narrative in a way that no photograph could. The defense attempted to undermine this portrayal, casting doubt on witness credibility and suggesting alternative explanations for Margaret's injuries. But each objection felt hollow against the palpable truth in Margaret's voice, a truth that echoed through the courtroom like a haunting refrain. This revelation fortified the prosecution's case as they prepared for trial, undeterred by the defense's attempts to sow discord. As they exited the courthouse, Harper couldn't shake the gravity of what lay ahead, a trial that promised to unearth even deeper truths. Outside, a community support rally had gathered, filling the air with chants demanding justice for Margaret and all victims of domestic abuse. The scene was both heartening and tense, as supporters clashed verbally with Edward's few remaining sympathizers. Amidst this fervor, a local advocacy group emerged with new evidence, prior reports filed against Edward that had somehow slipped through bureaucratic cracks. These documents bolstered their case further, painting a consistent pattern of control and violence. This discovery enriched Harper's understanding of Edward's history and emboldened their pursuit of justice. As tensions simmered outside, inside the courthouse, all eyes turned to the judge who was about to make a crucial decision, whether to proceed to a full trial. The defense pushed aggressively for a plea deal, arguing mitigating circumstances in an attempt to sway proceedings. Yet every argument seemed futile under the weight of evidence amassed against Edward. With bated breath, they awaited the judge's ruling. When it came, it was resolute. The case would go to full trial. This decision ensured that justice would be pursued to its fullest extent, an acknowledgement of Margaret's suffering, and an opportunity for truth to emerge unencumbered. As Harper reflected on this outcome, he felt both relief and anticipation. The trial promised revelations yet untold, layers yet undiscovered beneath Edward's veneer of deceit. Yet as night descended over Otsego County once more, an unease lingered, a sense that not all was resolved despite their progress. The mysterious accomplice hinted at by the recent morgue discovery loomed large in his thoughts. Who were they? And what role had they played in Margaret's final days? Harper knew these questions demanded answers beyond what the current trial could provide. As he prepared for what lay ahead, he couldn't escape one chilling realization. Even as justice approached for Margaret Carlisle, shadows still danced on the edge of their understanding, whispers of truths yet uncovered.